Hello, everyone. On this podcast, if you are a frequent listener, you know that I often talk about communication best practices and how you can implement them. But sometimes those communication best practices rub right up against some sort of cultural communication norm in your organization that simply cannot make those communication best practices work. So what do you do? Well, one of the things I wanted to focus on today in today's speaking tip spotlight is a very common challenge that many people face, which is how do you present slides that are incredibly busy? You know, you would love to be able to take out about half of the information that appears on that slide, but you simply can't, either because your executive that you're presenting to requires it or the template is just not user-friendly. How do you manage that? We're going to be talking about some strategies that you can take after this. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a 4-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. My day job, and oftentimes my night job, is doing training for folks who are at the leadership level or the emerging leader level. And we're talking oftentimes about how to prepare your content. You know, obviously part of that is your talk track. The other part is how you use visual aids to support that talk track. And one of the things that I always get a little bit of pushback on is how to implement slide design best practices, because they say, hey, Karin, we've got this template that we have to use. There's no way that you can adjust it. You know, even the font size is standardized, or perhaps they're presenting a lot of numbers, and it's almost like you take your Excel spreadsheet and you stick it into a slide. And so by virtue of that, the numbers are small and it's really, really busy. So I hear you, and that is painful. So I want to share with you how you can navigate presenting to a slide that does not make it easy for you to do it well. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is how to deal with data-heavy slides. You know, say that you have financials that you are delivering, and the typical thing that I see that happens is that people will put up this like kind of wall of numbers with the table, and maybe everything's in grayscale. And it has to be there because oftentimes the people you're presenting to want to see all the raw data. Don't take it out because they're thinking that you might not know what you're talking about, or perhaps that you're trying to hide something. So you have this wall of numbers. So what do you do with that? Well, the first thing I would suggest, and this might not even be possible in your world, but I want to share it with you anyway, is using some call out. So what do I mean by a call out? So a call out in my world would be just simply a way to guide their eye. Because if you imagine you've got like this wall of figures, nobody knows which number is important, which number is not important. So you make it really apparent to them by doing something like drawing a rectangle around the number that's important, even putting like an arrow that is pointing to the appropriate number. And when you do that, you eliminate the inevitable confusion that happens when you just put up a wall of figures and people are trying to look all over the screen and figure out, okay, what is this? What is valuable? What is irrelevant? And you make it really clear by using those boxes, those shapes that you have in every sort of PowerPoint. And you can even use an arrow that's pointing to the right one. And as you're doing this, then you can speak to it and you can explain, there's lots of figures on here. Happy to talk about any of them. But the one I want to draw your attention to is this 168,000 where we're missing our mark or we're exceeding expectations, depending upon what your message is. So that is the first thing I would suggest. You've got the template. Can you layer something on top of it to call out like a particular area on the screen, whether that be a number, whether that be a certain metric, that will allow you to speak to it and focus their attention on what is important. The second thing I would suggest, like say that you can't put any call outs on the screen, is to be overly communicative of where you want to focus their gaze, because there is always this time when you put up a slide when people are trying to figure it out. And if you think about best practices for slide design, you want people to be able to get the gist, understand the basics of your slide in 3 to 5 seconds. Well, some of those really busy slides, it's going to take a whole lot longer than 5 seconds. It might take 5 minutes in some cases. So how can you manage that situation? Well, what I would say is try to use visual and verbal cues of where they should be focusing on the screen. So a visual cue, if your platform allows, is to use the cursor. You can use the cursor to, and I wouldn't like perpetually draw around a specific number, but I would use it to initially, draw their attention to it. And then you can stop. But if you have this constant movement of your cursor on the screen, or say that you use the embedded laser pointer that they call it in PowerPoint, then I would stop. I would just draw your attention to it and then stop. Don't move anymore. The one thing I would say is if you're in person and you've got that really busy slide, the same holds true. You need to guide their gaze. You need to let them know where they should be focusing. So you can do that physically, with your hand. Like say that you're standing up in front of the room and you've got the slides behind you. You can actually turn around and point to the area that you wanted to have them focus their attention. A lot of people like laser pointers. I feel like the only time that works well is if you're trying to entertain your cat and they like to run after the little red dot. I just find it more distracting than helpful. And I know there's some comfort in that by using a little red laser pointer dot, but it just looks messy. And I find that most people cannot do that well. So I prefer like an actual hand movement. And that seems to do the trick for a lot of folks. And then you also don't have to think about one more thing that you have to navigate. So use a visual cue. A verbal cue is where you're calling out locations of things on the screen. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can say, on the left-hand side of the screen, you see in the third bullet down, there you're talking about location, and you're being really clear. Okay, there are 10 bullet points on here. I want you to focus on the third bullet point. And that way, hopefully their eye will follow your direction. You can also call out colors. You can see in the green that on our pie chart, that green piece of pie is getting better, from Q4 versus, Q3. So you can call out colors. You can call out, just some obvious things that you see. You can see the trend line is going up in green and purple and blue. And that way you're telling them where they should be focusing their attention. Okay, the third thing that I would suggest to you, and this can be a bit controversial, is, sometimes your slide is hurting you more than it's helping you. So, for example, if you are doing a virtual presentation, there is a general impetus to keep the slides up the whole time. It's like nobody can talk if slides are not on the screen. That's not the case. Think about if you're in person. You don't have your back turned to the audience the entire time and you just all stare at the screen. No, you are the primary source of information and you're using your slides to help you, but you're not letting them take over. Your slides should support you. They should not be the show. And that is the same situation in a virtual presentation, but it's worse because a slide can dominate the screen and it minimizes your impact in the room. So what I would say is if you have the slide up there and there's a discussion going on around the topic that perhaps it's alluding to, you don't need to have that slide up there if you're not looking at specific things on that slide or talking about specific things on that slide. I would take that slide away. And then it recaptures a normal conversation space because suddenly, hopefully, if people have their cameras on, you can see everybody on the screen and you can have conversation and you don't have this slide that is super distracting, visually cluttered, impeding a good dialogue. So those are my 3 suggestions on how to manage presenting to a busy slide, a slide that does not and will not follow slide design best practices. First of all, consider call outs to draw their attention to what is most important on the screen so that they can, kind of block out the stuff that's not. The second would be to be overly communicative of locations and colors on the screen so that you can focus their attention where it ought to be. And then the third thing is if your slide is not something that is being talked about at that moment, take it away and have a conversation in this normal space. I've been talking about what to do if you cannot follow slide design best practices, but perhaps you're wondering what are those slide design best practices? So that's what today's bonus content is going to be. If you would like to know what are the best ways to have your visual aids remain aids and not the be all end all, go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content. Once again, it's speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, and you will find a cheat sheet. That's hard to say, cheat sheet for slide design best practices. So hopefully you can take those in and then spread the good news to your team and to your colleagues, and we can all avoid death by PowerPoint. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to sharing more Speaking Tips Spotlight episodes in the upcoming year. Thanks so much, everybody. Until next time.